Let's start looking into getting a functional game mode. We already have the ability to spawn a ball and respawn it, but let's actually start getting a score being calculated and also getting a basic UI up and running. So to begin with, let's work out how to get a score going. I'm going to load up the game mode class, and within here I think it's a good idea for us to look at adding a new function that's going to be the add score function. Now realistically we could at any stage have just a variable inside of the game mode that is the current score. However, it's a good idea for us to have an add score function so that if there are multipliers or anything like that contributing to the current score, anything that wants to increment the score simply reads in the current number of points, the game mode assesses the number of multipliers and anything else like that going on, and goes from there. So I'm going to add a new function. This is going to be called add score. And for this we're going to need a couple of things. So to begin with, we're probably going to want an input that is a float, and this input is going to be the points to add. Now, upon add score getting called, we're going to be having to get the score, multiplying the current points to add against a multiplier value, and then we're going to add that to the current score and set the current score to be that output value. Now that means we need two things that we haven't already created. The first is a score variable for us to add and check. So this is going to be called score, and it's going to be a float. Now after we've got the score, we're also going to want to have something for a multiplier. Now even though it's likely that all of our multipliers will be like 2 times multiplier, 4 times multiplier, 8 times multiplier, it's probably a good idea for us to make this a float as well, just in case. So I'm going to make a variable called multiplier. I'm going to hit compile, and I'm going to make sure that my multiplier by default is set to 1, because if we set that to 0, we're going to have some real trouble. So I've got my score and I've got my multiplier. So all I need to do is get the points to add, multiply it against my current multiplier, so it's going to be multiplied against a float times float, at which point I'm going to drag in multiplier. I'm then going to get this, and I'm going to add this to my current score. So I'm just going to hit plus, and you'll see that we have float plus float. And again, I'm going to drag in the variable and connect it to here. We now have points to add times multiplier plus the current score is going to be equal, and I'm going to drag this in, and I'm going to hold down Alt, so it's a set function, is going to be equal to score. Now that we've done that, it's probably a good idea for us to have an output function so that anything that's adding the current score also has the ability to see what the current score has now become. So I'm just going to add a new output, which is going to be a float, and the value here is just going to be called new score. I'm going to plug this in over here, and I'm going to connect the output of my set to the output of my function. Compile and save, and we now have a working add score function. So it's now time for us to go ahead and work out a way that we can add some score to the game to begin calculating. So I think a good way for us to begin with this is for us to go to the bumpers and just make them add 10 points every time. So I'm going to open up the bumper class, and I'm going to look at this initial bump function that we have going on that adds an impulse. At the moment it adds an impulse, it then spawns the sound attached, at which point it goes through this entire bump loop to make the animation. So it's probably a good idea for us to, before we play the animation, increment the points at about this area here. Now if you think about it, to add the score, we need to get the current game mode, we need to cast the game mode to be a pinball game mode, because that's the only game mode that has the add score functionality to it, and then we need to add some score to it. So to do this, I'm going to right click here and I'm going to get the game mode. At which point I'm going to cast to pinball game mode. Now this could be converted to a pure function if we wanted to, but just in case I'm going to drag this up here and I'm going to set this up such that if it fails, it goes ahead and does what it normally does. So cast fail calls play from start. However, if it succeeds, we're going to get this and we're going to call add score, and we're going to add 10 points. Now the other thing that I'm going to do, purely as a quick testing variable, is I'm going to print the current score to my screen so I can see it. So I'm going to drag off the exec pin and type in print string. I'm now going to connect this to the play from start. And finally, I'm going to connect my input string, which at the moment is going to say the word hello, to my new score. And it's going to automatically convert from new score to a string and should just put a number on screen every time something is hit. So I'm going to hit compile, save, and then I'm going to play this. You can see in the top left that we just got 10 points, 20 points, 30 points. So the system's working. That said, we are going to have some issues later on when we need to reset the score. But for the time being, this is enough. In the next lesson, we're going to look at adding a UI to properly display this without strings. So, right now, I'm going to quickly remove this print string value and connect add score to the play from start. Compile, save, and we're done.